Going all electric isn't just for sedans, pickups, and small SUVs anymore. The 3-row EV9 SUV, which is about the same size as the current gas-only Telluride, shares its platform with the upcoming Hyundai Ioniq 7. The EV9 comes in rear or all-wheel drive, with the latter featuring a 379 HP dual-motor powertrain. Both the all-wheel drive and rear-drive long-range models have a 99.8 kWh battery. The EPA estimates delivers 304 miles of range. With the single-motor setup, the standard rear-wheel drive EV9 has a 76.1 kWh battery that gets an EPA-estimated 230 miles of range. Its big size comes with a big towing capacity of 5,000 pounds, the same max capacity as the gas-powered Telluride. The EV9's usable third row of seats should appeal to growing families. What's new for 2024? The EV9 is a new nameplate for the Kia brand and the next in the company's plan to have 11 new electric vehicles for sale by 2026. Pricing: the price of the 2024 Kia EV9 starts at $56.395 and goes up to $75.395 depending on the trim and options. The mid-range Wind trim appears to offer the most value by unlocking the more powerful all-wheel drive powertrain for 379 horsepower. It also comes with desirable standard features such as second-row captain's chairs, a heat pump for the climate control system, heated front seats and steering wheel, and a host of driver assistance features. Motor, power, and performance. The EV9 lineup starts with the rear-wheel drive light trim, which features a single rear-mounted electric motor that makes 215 horsepower. The light long-range version is rear-drive too. However, despite adding a bigger battery, its peak power drops to 201 horses. All-wheel drive models have a dual motor arrangement with a combined 379 ponies, and an available boost mode increases the peak torque output and provides quicker acceleration. During testing, the all-wheel drive EV9 achieved 60 miles per hour in just 4.5 seconds, making it the one to get for folks who want the punchy takeoffs that EVs are typically known for. It takes the gas-powered Telluride 2 seconds longer to reach 60 miles per hour. A performance-oriented GT model will join the lineup for the 2025 model year and could offer as much as 576 horsepower. We've found the EV9 to be as pleasant to drive as it is to look at. On the highway, the EV9 has a pleasantly soft ride, and the defeatable one pedal smoothly rolls the SUV to a complete stop. Range, charging, and battery life. The entry-level light model comes with a 76.1 kWh battery pack, which offers an EPA-estimated 230 miles of driving range. The light long-range model and the EAWD versions have a larger 99.8 kWh pack. The light long-range model is rated by the EPA for up to 304 miles of driving per charge, while the Wind EAWD and Land EAWD models are rated for 280 miles. Going with the top-spec GT line trim drops the estimated range to 270 miles per charge. During our 75 mph highway range test, the EV9 GT line drove 240 miles, just shy of its 270-mile estimate. Every EV9 uses Kia's 800-volt electrical architecture, allowing DC fast chargers to replenish the battery quickly. The EV9's 11 kW onboard charger is about average among competitors, but its 230 kW maximum DC fast charging speed is said to add 100 miles of driving range in just 13 minutes, with an average charging speed of 139 kilowatts between a 10 and 90% state of charge. This rate is among the highest average of any EVs we've tested. Fuel economy and real-world MPGe. The EPA estimates that the EV9 is capable of 80 to 89 MPGe, depending on which drivetrain it uses. The EV9 Lite is the most efficient, at 89 MPGe, with a 99.8 kWh battery pack and rear-wheel drive. It should be no surprise to anyone. The performance-minded GT line with all-wheel drive gets the lowest MPGe rating of 80. For more information about the EV9's fuel economy, visit the EPA's website. Interior, comfort, and cargo. The EV9 can be ordered in either 6 or 7 passenger versions, depending on whether the second row has captain's chairs or a bench. On the EV9's upper trim levels, the third row is power folding. The front seats were firmly cushioned in the prototype we drove, and much of the synthetic upholstery felt a bit cheap. Hopefully, that isn't the case for US spec models. The EV9's second-row captain's chairs feel much like the fronts and offer heating, ventilation, and massaging. In the very back, the third row easily accommodates adults, but requires some concessions given by those in the second row in order to offer comfortable leg room. The EV9's rear cargo space holds 20 cubic feet, nearly as much as the Telluride, or up to 82 cubic feet, with both the second and third rows folded flat. Infotainment and connectivity. Inside the EV9 is a pair of 12.3-inch screens, one for the gauge cluster and a second for infotainment, with a dedicated HVAC readout between them. The EV9 lacks physical knobs, and its buttons are reduced compared to other Kias on sale today, with just a few key HVAC controls and a volume knob remaining, along with touch-sensitive controls embedded in the dash to jump to different menus. The EV9 uses an entirely new generation of infotainment, whose details are also under wraps until the new 3-row is revealed. Safety and driver assistance features. The EV9 comes with several standard driver assistance features, including systems such as blind spot monitoring and automated emergency braking. Kia also offers a hands-free driving mode that's bundled with a more advanced version of adaptive cruise control. However, it's only for the EV9 GT line. For more information about the EV9's crash test results, visit the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration (NHTSA) and Insurance Institute for Highway Safety (TKIHS) websites. Key safety features include standard automated emergency braking with pedestrian detection, standard lane departure warning with lane keeping assist, standard adaptive cruise control with hands-free driving mode. Warranty and maintenance coverage. Kia provides one of the best warranty plans in the industry. Unfortunately, unlike Hyundai, it doesn't come with any complimentary scheduled maintenance. Limited warranty covers 5 years or 60,000 miles. Powertrain warranty covers 10 years or 100,000 miles. No complimentary scheduled maintenance. Electromobiles, the cars of the future, are now in the spotlight. In this video, we introduce you to KIA's huge electric car, the EV9 model for the year 2024. If you found the video useful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.